So prior to me trying to explain this buried animation trailer, I have to let it be known there are three major characters here, and that's kind of who season 2 is focused around. To start off, the three characters are Vinny and Dominic Blackwinter and June Creek. And these three characters kind of come together in a puzzle that everyone in their team kind of has to solve and figure out. And the ironic part is, it started with Vinny doing a sacrifice and playing with magic, and it ends with June making a sacrifice and ending with magic. What Sylvia did to Vinny and Dominic was she basically cornered them, where Dominic went out into a hallway to look for Vinny, and then Sylvia came up behind him and she took her sword, a very special sword actually, and went and she impaled him through his chest. And then, she turned around, used her magic, and she created like a beam of ice spikes. And that's how Vinny gets all his scars. It looks like he's been like slashed multiple times, but it's actually from icicles. So what Vinny does, well, he himself is barely alive, is he kind of takes Dominic and he kind of like drags him into like a little room, and he tries to kind of like save his body. He's like trying to use magic, he's trying to use his familiar powers, and it's not working. And then his soul kind of starts to like leave his body, and Vinny's like, no. And so what he does is he's like, okay, I'm going to temporarily put his soul in the familiar realm, and then I can like fix his body while it's in there, and then just like put it back. Well, what happened was instead is he put his soul into the familiar realm while the familiar itself was leaving Dominic's body. And so what that did was it anchored his soul to the Gemini familiar. And then when the familiar chose a new host, they also got Dominic. And that is how June got Dominic. Vinny broke the familiar. Whenever a familiar holder decides to make a sacrificial trade, which is where they let their familiar use their magic without being bound by their host's familiar connection. Basically, they get to be the person that they were for a borrowing of their magic, and then they go back to being just like the familiar. Well, usually the host has to give something up in return, and so the host sacrifices something and the familiar sacrifices something. However, Vinny did not do a classic trade. He did it improperly with a lot of imperfections, and so while he was performing this spell, he lost his eye, the blue eye on his right. So although it's very inconvenient for him, because now he's not allowed to fight in the military, he just has to work at a desk, you can now very easily tell which twin is which. When June got her familiar, she wasn't born with it. She was about 7 years old. She didn't want it. She hated it. And so, going forward, she never told anyone about it. She never liked it. She did accept some of the bonuses of having the familiar. Like, it made her really fast. It made it easy for her to pickpocket. And it automatically made her incredibly good at sword fighting, because Dominic's really good at sword fighting. And that's the only reason June actually has two swords. She can't use them, but if Dominic possesses her, then she can. Now, the reason why Volume 2 is so Dominic, Vinny, and June centered is because Dominic starts to get really fed up with being stuck in the body of a child, especially one who wants to act like he doesn't exist and that she can ignore him forever because he wants his life back, you know? He's not dead, he's just there. So Dominic kind of urges June to get going. And then when she reaches the Black Winter estate, she gets even more stubborn about not letting Dominic do anything. You know, not letting him like use any magic and stuff to be like, hey guys, I'm here. She just kind of locks him away even more and more. So the goal of Dominic getting his body back gets really pushed on June because now that Dominic's in his own house again, he's like, hey, they have spell books in here. We can probably find one that can fix this for both of us.